Joining us live is the New South Wales SES Deputy Commissioner, Daniel Austin. Daniel, appreciate your time. I understand the worst of the rain event was due to hit around now in Sydney. Give us a sense of the situation as you're seeing it now and which other regions are really copping it at the moment.
Yeah, so we can continue to see heavy rainfall move through. I've seen some reports of some bursts of rain, quite heavy across the area, and that pretty much broad metropolitan area, particularly up to the south coast and towards the Hunter, are also seeing quite heavy rainfall along the way. We have had some good news in that we don't seem to be seeing the rainfall totals that we expected down south, so down through the south coast and even parts of the Illawarra. But there is still a prediction for some heavy rainfall potentials in those areas. So the message from us doesn't change. It is still about being aware, being across your situation where you are and keeping yourself abreast of what's happening so that you know your risk.
How many evacuation orders are currently in place and evacuation warnings? How many people are you talking about here in terms of those who are being impacted?
Yeah, so right across the state, we are looking at numbers around the 500,000 all told. There are in excess of 85 either warnings or orders across the state. So it's 75 orders that are in place, evacuation orders that are in place, and 13 evacuation warnings that are currently in place across the state.
You mentioned that it's wise for people to keep abreast of local information. We have been interviewing a lot of locals here on Sky News throughout the day who are in various regions around the state, and many of them are describing the tricky decisions that they're having to make about whether to stay or leave. What is the best advice you have for people who are faced with that decision?
Yeah, so as we've been saying now for a number of days, we've been warning people that this weather system was on the way. Whilst we may not have known exactly what it would look like a number of days out, we've been pretty confident on the general area this was going to impact. So, we've been looking at that, making sure people are up to date, staying across social media, websites, bureau sites, the radars, those kind of things, as well as the mainstream media, to make sure that they are across their situation. But also not just staying indoors, to actually keep abreast of the situation by looking outside and seeing what is going on. You really need to have that level of situational awareness of your specific scenario. We've been asking people to limit their travel and keep non-essential travel to a minimum where possible. And from what we've been able to see all day, it certainly appears that people have heeded that particular message. So, go early if you're going to go. You don't have to wait for a warning if you want to choose to relocate. There are numerous evacuation centres open around New South Wales at the present time. So there are a variety of options for people, but leaving late is always a dangerous scenario.
Have you been inundated with calls at the SES? Have you heard many reports of people being injured?
So today, in the last 24 hours, we've had about 192 flood rescues. Just under 60 of those were in and around the metropolitan area. So we had a spike of calls or a little bit of a rush on calls when we saw some of those earlier heavy rain bands come through. But calls have been relatively consistent. Places like Wyong and Gosford, some of the busier places, as well as places like Hawkesbury, that have seen probably the majority of the calls so far today.
Have you got the resources you need? Are your teams being backed up by the ADF?
Yeah, so a fabulous commitment by New South Wales SES volunteers over the last number of days, right across the state, and we've received some amazing support, as we always do, from our emergency services partners within New South Wales. The Australian Defence Force is certainly playing a role with us, and we also have assistance in from other emergency services around Australia. So, we've got some fantastic resources. We've been positioning those resources to the areas of highest risk. We continue to focus on the north coast, the far north coast, and the Northern Rivers district in particular. And in particular, we continue to push more resources up there as we can get them in as quickly as possible to support the community.
Poor old Queensland's being hit with another storm after their flooding events in recent days. What is the expectation as to when New South Wales will be able to start to dry out a bit?
Yeah, look, there is currently some signals of a potential another system either Sunday or into next week. So we're monitoring that very closely. We've got at least another 24 hours before this particular system moves away. And we're keeping a very close eye on thunderstorm activity up in the Northern Rivers, and keeping, as we did last week, keeping a very close eye on what the weather system does across the border into Queensland. So, we can see where those floodwaters may particularly try to move, or whether that system also tries to move south. So we're keeping a real close eye on a number of fronts across New South Wales and more broadly across the weather patterns.
SES Deputy Commissioner Daniel Austin, appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much for joining us, that very latest information from SES headquarters. Thank you.